Hello, everyone. Here we are again. Another beautiful and cold evening here for us in Toronto, Ontario, and I'm again Marco Magalhães, and I'm talking to you from the Toronto Spirit Society. I'm here today with you guys in on Kardec Radio, live on Facebook. So first of all, I would like to thank everyone for uh, being with us tonight, and we're going to be talking about. Very interesting topic today, which is probably one of the topics that I really like the most to talk about when I'm talking about André Luiz and Spiritism. It overlaps a lot with what I do in my own research on health and disease and mechanism of disease. And we're going to be trying to bring a little bit of what André Luiz says um, in the book Evolution to Words, chapter 20, chapter that we're doing tonight, with some of our burning questions about what happens in this interaction between spirit, perispirit, and physical body, and why diseases manifest, why infections and other diseases manifest, and how can we make sense of all that? Right? The Evolution to Words really talk in detail, particularly the second part, is an amazing book by André Luiz through the hands of Chico Xavier Valdo Vieira. It really talks in detail about a lot of this mechanism. So hello everybody, Dilson, Jailton, everyone that's logging in there, just saying the praying hands and the hi. So hello everybody. So this book is really interesting because it's going to bring to us very modern, like actual concepts related to medicine that were obviously very difficult to comprehend when the book was first released, and now we obviously have a much better understanding of it. But we're still trying to grab some of the concepts. But at the same time, the book brings a very practical approach to it. So, in other words, you can delve into it and go into very detailed mechanism of disease, or you can take the core of the message, which we're going to be talking about tonight. So hang in there. We're going to go through this amazing chapter in the next few minutes. So now that everyone is in there and we're all connected together in the same vibration of of love and charity and respect and trying to learn from Andrea Luiz and Chico, let's get started then. So we're really talking on this detailed concepts of infections and diseases. That's really the core of what we're going to be talking about tonight. And just to start, Andrea Luiz brings so the very first line of this chapter is a question, as we see a lot in the second part of the book. So the question is the microbial invasion, or infections in general, linked to spiritual causes? Wow, that is a very good opening question, right? And yeah, I know Rudy's present and ready. Here we are. Okay, we're ready. Let's get going. So, that is a very interesting question, right? So we know now that we've been through so many of these chapters that yes, there are spiritual causes, or the backbone of these processes are all reverting back to spiritual causes, right? But now the question is very specific to one point. So is microbial invasion, so basically infections based on microbes, linked to the spiritual causes, right? So let's see what André Luiz has to say to us. So the very first line is this: except in the case of infections that arise from the lack of hygiene or common hygiene. Well, we know about that, right? So obviously, if we do not follow basic rules of hygiene, we'll get bacterial infections and other certain types of microbial infections, and that's a reality. And that really has not what I'm saying, except in those cases, which these cases are not spiritual, right? And I'll give you a simple one, right? Someone sneezes on the hand, has a cold, a virus, and shake hands with another person who then inadvertently use that hand to, to rub the eyes or to eat something, well, what's going to happen? Someone's going to have another cold. So that's a viral infection, very common. Common colds are extremely common anywhere in the world, and they pass, directly between individuals. If you don't follow basic rules of common hygiene, they spread much easily, but they can still spread anyways because of the air particles that you can breathe in. Another example, for example, if you don't wash your hands before eating, right? Many bacteria can live in your hands, and if you don't do the proper hygiene, there's a very high risk that you're going to introduce in your body bacteria that can cause infection. And that's, again, very common. Well, so that has nothing to do with you as a spirit, really, because it's more about the direct consequences of your action of not following a basic rule, right? So except in those cases, then Andrea Luiz is saying, well, everything else is can be directly linked to a spiritual cause. Okay, so the way he describes this is like the depression, or this is a literal translation. So I think the perfect meaning would be the suppression, right? Created in us or by ourselves. So this is action. So basically, remember action, reaction. We talked a lot about it in the previous chapter. So the actions that I do that will create a particular consequence in my own body, right? Particularly, and then he says here, in the domains of abuse of our forces. Well, so here's a summary, right? This is a one-liner, but very complex. So the consequences of my own actions will cause changes to my body. That's what he's saying. That particularly when the consequences are due to abuse of my forces or my functions, or I actually not doing the right things, right? That's exactly what he's saying. So if you don't do the right things, there will be a consequence, and that can suppress our own immune system, that can suppress our ability to fight these infections. That's what he's getting into. And let's go into more details now, because now he's going to go into more detail. So he'll say tempering the vital exchanges of the organic body, so my body, physical body that I can see right now, by surrendering to unbalanced thoughts or actions, right? So remember the exchanges of energy, the vital centers we talked about, how the vital centers correspond to particular areas in your body, or the plexus that will regulate endocrine system, will regulate particular core systems of the body. So if I play with it by my own actions and thoughts, and I alter the way these energies flow through my vital centers, right? Surrendering, when I surrender my mind to actions or to unbalanced actions or actions that are not well thought, that is when things starts to go wrong. So he's putting a little note there for you. And don't worry, I'll have diagrams for things later on, because I know things will get more and more complicated. So I did some diagrams. I'll show you in a few more slides. Okay, so hang in there. So this will, what this will do? So it will establish disturbance in others, so in prejudice or in harm of others. So let's put it all together now. If I'm actually here doing things that are not really the best, so unbalanced, unthought actions, and I'm disturbing these vital exchanges in my body, and I'm actually doing harm to another person, that's what he's saying here, this will generate areas in my body that the harmony of the cells will be ruptured. Now we're getting into it, right? So let's think about it. So the consequence of my own actions, and sometimes these actions mean that I'm actually doing some harm to another person, right? So the consequences of those actions will rupture the cellular harmony of my body. So my body in some areas will not function as it's supposed to, right? Remember the vital exchanges from the vital centers and how that interacts with the universal cosmic fluid will also change. So if the vital centers are not functioning well, the exchanges are not working, and my thoughts and my actions are generating disharmony of my body, what's going to happen? He's going to say here, the physio, or in other words, like the physical body, psychosomatic, so mind, translating into body, psychosomatic tissues. So in other words, the tissues from my spirit, perispirit, and the body, all of them, that's what he's saying, that constitute the vehicle expression will be affected. So I'm going to be affected as a whole, right? So I'm going to be in disharmony. So there will be a rupture in that harmony between my cells. And now you can just put it all together, and we can do that in one liner. Well, depending on what you do, your body will feel the consequences of it. Not only what you do, but what you think, right? Because remember, it's a like physio-psychosomatic. So all the layers of you as a human are being affected and are interacting, right, with each other. Okay, let's make this a little bit more interesting with a little diagram, right? So I'll try to put it all together now. So I'm using this diagram also based on other books. So I'm looking at Mechanism of Mediumship and Spirit's book and Evolution Two Worlds, right? So if you look at the center here, you'll see this is just 3 layers here, which again, it's just like a diagram. So yeah, don't say, Marco, you just said that the perispirit doesn't have a perfect shape. It is not contained to the body. Now you're drawing everything together. Yeah, I know. But unfortunately, my drawing skills are not that the best. So this is what I can do. So I'll show you the 3 layers. We represent the more solid one will be the body. The completely translucent one is the spirit, and this intermediate will be the perispirit, right? Okay, so we're this 3 layers individual. That's who we are, and we're constantly influenced, right, by a lot of things. So the little clouds are our own thoughts, right? And we did this exercise not too long ago. It's like, can you actually look at what you're thinking right now, what during your day, that is really representing what other people see in you, because we're surrounded by it. So that's what we're trying to show here. And those, we can also have interactions with other spirits, right? And those are our little friends there. They're influencing us either positively or negatively, right? So this is a very complex scenario. That will have consequences in particular parts of our body when, remember, we just said there's disharmony of our biological system that will generate consequences. And what is the trigger? So the trigger is your negative thoughts, selfishness, pride, hate, and also physical actions. Smoking, alcohol, lifestyle, nutrition, are you eating well or not? Those are basic questions. So all of those things together, if you put that all in one side of this little equation, plus your thoughts, plus your actions, and all of the things together, that will generate our little dark clouds here, which is the areas in your body that will be influenced by that combination. All right, we're all following that? Okay, so let's see now what Andrea Luiz is going to talk to us now. Another little diagram so we can follow this. So Andrea Luiz continues saying that once the dysfunction has been verified, so the cellular harmony dysfunction that he talked about, right? The entire area affected, and I don't know what's this area, it really depends, right? Depends on what's happening in the individual, but this entire area affected by this lack of this maladjustment becomes susceptible to microbial invasion, right? Because if things are working perfectly, they really cannot cause an infection in majority of the cases, right? There has to be some mechanism that's not working well so they can invade. So, and this is what we're talking about here. For example, he gives a very interesting example, as if you have an area that is unguarded, so an area that is not guarded, because whoever's supposed to be there to take care of that particular area does not have the base necessary, for generating action of their responsibility. In other words, think about this. So let's go to our little diagram here. So this is the individual A here, as this little, you see the physical body here, and you have areas in the body that are now directly influenced by the disharmony generated by my actions and my thoughts, right? And the actions can be from now, the actions can be from the past, okay? These areas, when Andrea Luiz is talking about the the unguarded areas. These are the natural defenses of our body. And the natural defenses of our body, they function directly downstream of who we are, our thoughts that control our systems, that control everything. So we as a spirit are controlling all of this, okay? And we control this through the perispirit that connects to the physical body. So now what you see here, like this little the image on the right, which is actually quite a beautiful image. This is a very specialized type of image that we can do in the laboratory to show that in this case, that's the gut. That's the human gut. And those pinky squiggly things that you see on top are actually bacteria, right? So there's a bacteria living in our gut. Most of them are very nice and benign and they help us be alive. But sometimes, if the balance between the cells in the background fighting those bacteria and the bacteria factors themselves, if that balance is tipped, then what do we have? We have an infection. So in our bodies right now, we likely have more bacteria than actually cells from our own body. So you have an idea, you know, of how we coexist with those bacteria in our body. So what keeps that in check? That is our immune system. And our immune system, as we all know, works and is affected directly by our mind, state of mind, stress, depression, all those things, which is a direct evidence of we as a spirit, right? So, and Luiz continues, and later on in the chapter, he'll say that tuberculosis, leprosy, brucellosis, those are all diseases that are caused by infectious diseases, right? And amoebiasis, bacterial endocarditis, which is relatively common here for us too. Chagas disease, which is not common in North America, but certainly in Brazil, still very, very common. Many other diseases are precipitated, or they're allowed to occur because of the disharmony that is started by what we think and what we do, right? Those things together generated a disharmony that will affect everything, affects the way our immune system fights this bacteria, affects the way our cells keep them at check, affects the entire thing. So there's no support for them to fight back, and eventually the infection is going to happen. Right, and that's the mechanism here. And as he said, it's like you have an unguarded space where the defenses that are supposed to be there are not there, right? And that's the way Andrea Luiz describes this. Okay. Now we're getting a little bit more complicated, and it's not my fault. It is really because in this chapter, every single paragraph, if you read it again, if you have a chance, talks about a specific condition and a specific mechanism. So we'll go through those, and we'll have little diagrams to help out, right? So in the next section, he'll talk about, Andrea Luiz will talk about the specifically about cancer. And as a cancer researcher, that's an area that I'm very interested at, right? So this is what Andrea Luiz says. When synergistic work, so synergistic, they're working together. They're connected and working to help each other, right? That's synergy, right? So when synergy works, and when the synergy between cells in a particular tissue, this is important to know. Remember, we talked about this before when we talked about perispirit. Every single one of our cells, every single one of them, they work like a little clock. Every cell has a particular function. It responds a particular way, communicates in a particular way. If they're not working as they're supposed to be in their little environment, things will happen, right? And that you can have diseases in specific organs or dysfunctions that need to be corrected, right? So that's the harmony. That's the synergy that Andrea Luiz is talking about here. So when the synergistic work of this cell, so think about this, like every one of the billions of cells that we have, they're working together. See the perfection, the creation, right? They are all a single entity of life. You can culture them separate in a plastic dish, but they're not the same, right? They're in a completely different environment. When you put them all together, they allow our body to receive our spirit. Look how amazing that is. right? If we take them in isolation, they're just a little engine that keeps running, right? But if you put them all together and our spirit coordinates the whole thing, then here we are. That's us. So that talks about the perfection of creation. But that's a little parenthesis there. So let's talk now. So when the synergy is disrupted, right? Morbid entities, right? In this case, could be talking about cancer, but could also talk about infections, such as cancer, cause invading tumors. So tumors that are invasive, that are malignant, right? So those are malignant tumors, causes also metastasis. So metastasis is the spread of that primary tumor to distant sites. So that's metastatic disease. So understanding that the mutation, so the very first abnormality of this tumor that occurred later, a long time ago sometimes, at first followed a certain predisposition originated in the mind. Look how powerful that is, right? Because it brings now a direct connection between us as spirits and one of the most devastating diseases that we deal with today, which is cancer. So you keep it in perspective. In Canada today, which is where we are now, we have is the leading cause of death of all diseases, more than any other disease. It is about 2 in 5 Canadians will have cancer. 1 in 4 will end up dying of it, and that's the statistic we have today. So you understand. So the very first step in cancer formation was that mutation that occurred in a particular cell. So the cell got abnormal, right? So this abnormal cell is directly controlled, or the predisposition is through the spirit. And when did it happen? So it can happen at any time in life. It can happen. Remember, a few chapters ago, we talked about when disease happen. It depends. It can happen in utero when the spirit very first connects into the developing embryo, it already influences it, or it can happen later in life, and that can be influenced by actions and thoughts and all that. Okay, so the predisposition occurred controlled by the mind, and the vibrations, right, by the mind. So what are the vibrations of the mind? The thoughts, right? Is the processing system, right? So the processing on your mind on this disorganized cells, right? This is like predisposing you to have a tumor, had the effect of like X-ray production. So what's an X-ray? X-ray is a type of energy or radiation that can cause significant damage to cells, right? So that's why when we go take an X-ray, we just take a little bit of X-ray at a time to get the image. We protect sensitive parts of the body, and you don't want to be exposed to that a lot, because in a lot, if you're exposed a lot, you get a lot of cellular changes, right? So our thoughts work in our cells as X-ray or ultraviolet radiation. Ultraviolet, we all know, right? When we go to the sun and we get burned, right? And then what happens to our cells? We can have mutations in our cells due to sun exposure that can cause skin cancer. That's one example. So Andrea Luiz is bringing this 2 particular type of wave energies, which is X-ray and ultraviolet, as a way to tell us that, your thoughts and your mind can have that particular same effect in your cells. So Marco, I can have cancer without going to the sun. Yes, you can. Yeah. Right? Sun is a risk factor, right? There are a lot of factors involved, and Andrea Luiz is bringing probably one of the most important factors that is often disregarded, which is our incarnatory plan, right? What we've done in the past, what we want to do now, how our minds control the development of our body, and how the combination of our minds, or we as a spirit, and our actions in this particular incarnation can influence directly the functionality of our body. Okay? There you go. Very complicated, but let's now try to separate this in little pieces using the little cartoon that we made here, okay? So think about this as being all of us right now, okay? So we're here, and because of many things we do, right, of our actions and thoughts, sometimes, that little bit left, or a lot left sometimes, but the little bit of these selfishness that still live inside of us, the actions and thoughts that sometimes, the energy that we're projecting on other people, right? All those things eventually culminate in, remember the X-ray and ultraviolet project. So culminate in damage into particular types of, in particular areas of our body, because that energy accumulates in our perispirit, and the perispirit will extravasate that through our physical body. Okay? When we discarnate, and that's the little step here, we go to the second little piece of the diagram. Now we don't have a body anymore, right? But here we are as a spirit and a perispirit. Those areas in the perispiritual body will still be there, right? So you cause changes to the tissues, to the constituents of the perispirit, and those will survive death, right? Death of the physical body, right? Because real death really doesn't exist. So that will continue in the spiritual world. And obviously in the spiritual world, we'll have a chance to think about it. We go through school. Yeah, for those who were thinking about it, yeah, we go again and we study and we prepare and we read and we mop the floors. Remember Andrea Luiz, what he used to do? So we do all that. And then we say, hey, we're ready. Okay, we're going back. And you know what? I'm going to deal with it, and I'm going to do my best. Okay, so we do that. So we go back in, and when we get again and we reincarnate as the last one, as you can clearly see, those little green yucky looking clouds will come with us because that's who we are, right? They're in our spirit, they're consequences of our actions, and that energy will survive, right? Until we have to cleanse them through this new incarnatory process. Okay? Now, that will lead to what? That will lead to increased risks of diseases, that can lead to increased risk of cancers, or increasing infections, or chronic diseases. That can all be associated with it. But one thing that can certainly make things better or worse is the influence of our minds, and that's the little red arrow that you see there. So even after we reincarnate, depending on how we change our behavior, how we take on the responsibility of making positive changes, right? We can continue influence those areas in our bodies, and we can change it. We don't have to go through disease. We don't. But sometimes that's the last resort that we have to do, right? And it really depends on a lot of little pieces on this very complex mechanism. But most importantly, what Andrea Luiz is trying to tell us is this: listen, be careful what you're thinking and what you're doing, because if you really work hard on those, then you can positively, but not negatively influence, but unfortunately we still influence negative a lot, right? So we're still projecting ourselves a lot of this of this damaging energy, right, from our own minds. Okay, so let's keep going. All right, so that is now the possibly burning question, right? So how are we being helped, or are we being helped, right? After you start to understand a little bit more of the perfection of the creation, I think that question really doesn't make a lot of sense anymore, because we realize that God, perfect, and we as co-creators are always immersed in God's creative thoughts, and we're always being helped. So we are the ones that are blocking this help from actually taking place, from happening, right? And this is what Andrea Luiz is going to tell us here. At the disease, so the disease emerges when the patient, us, right, without, so Listen, without humility, patience, and spirit of service, and devotion to the good. Can we create a little checklist and put it in our fridge right now? Because he's telling us the recipe. So this is what I like about Luiz. You can actually forget everything I said for now, and you just keep that line in your mind. That's enough. That's really what we need to know, right? Because really, he's giving us a recipe to prevent things from happening. Because of the perfection of the law, we do have to deal with our consequences of our actions, but we can make them easier, right? We don't need to make them worse. We can make them better, right? So if you don't have patience or humility or a spirit of service or any of that, then we cannot assimilate the currents that are coming from the divine love. So we're living under this little umbrella, right, that we create. And that little umbrella that we create around us prevent or shields us from the source of goodness that is around us all the time, right? And he even goes even further. So see, it does circulate, like it goes around us incessantly. It's all the time around all. We're immersed on it. We're part of it, right? Here we are, part of this current of love through different and innumerable agents, all stimulating to the maximum benefit of existence on earth. So, what is he saying here? Like, listen, there's help everywhere, lots of it. You're immersed in divine love. And this you have to connect to. Because if you don't, you were yourself isolating yourself from help. So help is there all the time. Okay? Now, you probably say, Marco, so then if I do this and I connect and I do this and that, then therefore I'm not going to have any diseases again. That's not true, right? Because the level of existence that we are right now, we know that our bodies are highly susceptible to a lot of infirmities, right? But hey, we're going to hear in a minute that sometimes things were supposed to be much worse when we started doing our incarnatory process, and they end up being nothing afterwards because we're able to adjust and improve and learn and connect and work for the good with patience, humility, and spirit of service. We did all that, and we averted something that would cause a lot more suffering because of our good deeds. But sometimes, even if we do that, we're still going to go through the disease process because in the end, disease is the cure. And that's what Andrea Luiz is telling us here. The disease is the cure for what you accumulated in your perispiritual body through your actions for the long term. Because if you only look with the little glasses for this life and only for the body, then yes, so you only see the suffering. But for the long term, that is the moment where that energy that we talked about is started to expurgate itself through the physical body. Okay, and that's the beauty of it. So let's keep going. So then the next point is, so what can I do, right? So we talked about disease mechanism. We talked about what happens in diseases like cancer, for example. And now let's see what we're going to do, okay? And Andrea Luiz, again, who brings this to us. When the patient, however, so this, again, we are the patients today, okay? So let's all think about this. So when the patient, however, adopts a favorable behavior, a positive behavior or change, okay, to himself by the sympathy that instills in the neighbor. Oh, this is really getting amazing. Remember the story of Chico that was upset with the neighbor that killed his dog, and Emmanuel told him a million times, Chico, you gotta do something. You gotta do something good. You gotta learn what she likes the most, and you have to go there and give to her. And he did. He worked a lot. He worked hard to get the money to buy the sewing machine that she wanted. And he went there, he gave to her. And what is the description of that moment? Looking back at her, the energy of the entire moment. So the energy projected from her into him and from him, just the negative energy collapsed and transformed into light. So they were able, so Emmanuel, obviously with his immense understanding of the mechanism that we're talking about here, was able into one split second transform the energy and the thoughts and the actions of everyone involved, not only Chico, but also the neighbor. So what is this? This is what André Luiz is talking about, the favorable behavior to himself and also the neighbor. So what we learn in Spiritism, right? It's very nice if you're a great person and lives isolated from the universe. But you really show who you truly are when you live in society and you live to help others. So you put in practice charity, which is love in action, right? But why is that? So what André Luiz is saying is like, it's not enough for you to, trying to catch and change your thoughts all the time. Oh, I'm going to think, well, no, I'm going to do it. I'm going to change. If you actually don't put it in practice. That's what he's saying. So if you go and meditate about your disease 24 hours a day, and you go to higher levels of meditation, and you connect yourself to anything you can possibly imagine, if you don't do something, what are you doing? Isolating yourself from others that need is not the plan. Just think about it, right? There's always a plan behind things. So then André Luiz continues, the physical forces find solid support in the radiations or the energy of solidarity. Again, helping others. And the recognition that absorbs, so the energy that whoever you did the good things, the energy that's projected, you can absorb it. That's what he's saying. From those who collect direct or indirect help. Being able to sometimes circumscribe or control or to isolate the dysfunction in your body to a benign neoplasm. So what is he saying here? So let's think about this. I'll try to summarize it. If you had one of those areas in your body that are directly affected by, the energies that you generated through your actions, and it's there, and you have to deal with it, and that would eventually, in your reincarnatory plan, develop into a malignant tumor or cancer. Okay, by absorbing the good energies of your good actions, that area of your body can, instead of being a malignant tumor, be restricted to a benign tumor. So it changed. We don't have to go through the disease process. We still have to deal with our actions, but not necessarily in the most devastating way. We can also make it better, right? So that's what he's saying. So instead of having a cancer, you can have a benign neoplasm, which still responds to the surrounding tissues. See how amazing he is? He's actually talking about mechanism of disease into this book. So what is happening is that benign tumors tend to be circumscribed and encapsulated, and they don't invade the surrounding tissues. That's the definition of benign tumor. So that's exactly what he's saying. So if you absorb that good energy from the action of charity, you absorb that tumor will be restricted by all the tissues around it and will keep it there, isolated. It's not going to do much. Okay? Now, cartoon time. Okay? So if you go to the cartoon time here, so let's say individual green here with a happy face is, in Chico's example, is his neighbor that ended up getting, the present from him. And here we are, and this is us here, now with a happy face too. We still have the little yucky clouds there, showing that we still have the energy that we collected through our actions from the past and from recent, and they're still in our body, our spirit, but now our mind changed. See, now we're thinking positively about it. And not only that, we are absorbing that good vibration from all around us, right? Because of our good actions. Remember that happiness is contagious? That is absolutely true. Love is too, right? All we need to do is to get it kick-started, okay? So in summary, this is what we're talking about here. So the favorable behavior, what is that? The sympathy, living the righteous life, love your neighbor. So what is Andrea Luiz talking about? Love your neighbor, right? That's what we're talking about. That's really Jesus' message to us. Love yourself. And charity, we transform the little green yucky clouds into something much more amenable, much easier to treat, less suffering. You know, you change yourself. That's really what he's saying. Okay. And I'll keep moving. Otherwise, we're going to be here till one in the morning. And I don't think it will be a great idea. So what is the mechanism of that process then? Now we're going to go a little bit more in detail. Okay. And I have another diagram to help out. So almost all of them, or all of the diseases, that's what he's talking about, appear as a secondary phenomena over the zones of unhealthy predisposition. So the unhealthy predisposition is the direct consequence of the negative energy that we accumulated through our actions and that we form in our own body. He's saying by the imbalance of our mental forces, we just talked about it, to generate. Now, this is what happens now. He's talking about the specific what happens. So those energies, those forces generate ruptures or separations, we also call lack of continuity. So it separates the points of interaction between, look at the diagram here, physical body and the perispirit. Remember that I talked to you about the physical body and perispirit are completely interlaced and connected cell by cell, and there's a very organized tissues, right? So you cannot dissociate them, right? They overlap one another, right? So that's the normal conditions. Now, that predisposition that we talked about for diseases, which is the consequences of that negative energy that accumulated, does this. It actually creates a breach, creates a separation between the physical body and perispirit. And this particular spots, the cells in the physical body are not going to be responding as they normally do to the interaction of the physical body. And that is the predisposition to disease. Because now remember, the individual cells are not working well. Because for them to work well, work together, work in harmony, obviously the spirit and the perispirit are connected. Okay? So that's how we're understanding this a little bit more with Andrea Luiz. So now, and it continues. So through this mechanism, the microbial cell, so the microbial infection in this case, is promoted, or in this case, not the perfect translation, but promoted, to which we're more particularly inclined by the nature of our karmic account. So karmic account being our action and reaction, the law of action and reaction, what we've done in the past, right? So in this particular areas of the body where this happens, there's a higher chance for infections and diseases and cancer. There you go. Now we have a summary of the mechanism of the interaction of physical body and perispirit, and how does that translate into a disease process. Okay, and amazingly, Andrea Luiz is able to say that in one page. Okay, it's probably going to take us 1 year to understand it, but I think it's an incredible way of putting this. Okay, so let's keep going, right? Continue on the same topic now. So what is the mechanism of this process, right? So symptomatic, in other words, diseases that have a symptom, right? You can feel it. There's something wrong. Or asymptomatic illnesses, the ones that you don't really, for example, hypertension. Most people with hypertension from a long time, they don't really actually feel much of the hypertension, although they can be quite hypertensive. So that's almost asymptomatic sometimes, unless it's really, really high. Symptomatic disease, for example, chronic pain is a very known symptomatic disease. You have pain, right? When they appear, they can be stabilized or they can radiate. Right, so you have the same source of energy there, that negative energy in your perispirit that's manifesting itself. They can get worse or they can be controlled. That's what Andrea is saying. according to the dispositions of the mind. We're going back to the spirit again. So what is really, so going back to the first question, so what is controlling all of this? We are, through our thoughts, our actions, right? Our mind. So we can make things worse or we can make things better. That works or not, to redo the organic defenses, right? Our immune systems and our surveillance systems in a supreme effort of readjustment. So what do we need to do? We need to continue our own efforts to readjustment or to overcome the challenges or the mistakes that we've done in the past. Okay. But now, if we allow the automatism or this immediate response without thinking too much, admits or refuses the intrusion of pathogenic factors, so I can allow the infection to occur or not sometimes, right? According to position with the principle of cause and effect is found. So obviously, everything I do, there's an effect, right? So that is the core of everything we're talking about here. It could be from the past or it could be from the present, right? So the law of cause and effect, the action-reaction in this case, is the leading mechanism here, but that can be manipulated according to who we are and what we're doing, right? And that's what Luiz is saying, right? For example, and he's saying here that, our bodies are helping us in the disease process, is allowing us to expunge or to clear out this residues of evil from the past that we accumulated, right? But that can be manipulated in many ways. As he said, you can stabilize it, you can make it irradiate or getting bigger. You can readjust yourself and admit or refuse the intrusion. A lot of things can happen. You can make what was supposed to be a malignant tumor into a benign tumor. We just talked about it. So that is all possible. There's a lot of room because God is perfect, right? God is not punishing us. We're really dealing with our own actions, but he's helping us. Remember, if we don't hiding away from him, he's always, always, always helping us. Okay? And that's our little cartoon here. See, our little happy face guy here was able to control that same residue of negative energies that he's carrying by the actions of their own minds and thoughts and actions, while the sad-faced little guy was not able to, and things got worse. Okay? So what can I do? Again, that's the next step of what can I do. Okay? I think the cartoon summarizes it quite well. Okay? So here we are. That's us. And if we live by constant goodness, we can make our little green, yucky energy things much smaller. Or they go away. Can they go away? Yes, they can. Right? How many cases of individuals who were supposed to come based on a reincarnatory plan with devastating diseases had nothing? Yes, it happens. Right? But that depends. That is not a miracle. That means a lot of work behind. We have to work really hard for that. So now, particularly now in Brazil, what's going on? It's not going somewhere to someone do something on us that eventually disease will go away like a little plummet of smoke. That's not going to happen unless I've already worked really, really hard to change who I am. And then maybe God can allow that to happen because the laws are perfect, right? So we have to do with things. But if we're not ready yet, okay, if we're not ready yet and we haven't done our part, you can go to anyone you want. You can do, it's not going to happen, right? You can ask 50 people to pray for you 24-hour days for 5 weeks. It's not going to change the disease. Make you feel better because the energy is going to come to you. Everything, the doctors will be inspired and everyone will feel connected to a lot of positive energy. That will be great. Maybe you'll be able to cope better, but the disease will still be there. And they may still kill you, your physical body. Because the disease in this case is actually the cure process. So you can't take that away like that unless you really, really prepared for that. Okay? So let's see what Andrea is. So So thank you, Gabriel. Like I'm here checking the comments here. You're very welcome. Okay, you're very welcome. So constant goodness generates constant goodness, right? Think about it. Can we do that? This is time. We're being called, remember? And we heard this before, right? The workers of the last hour, we're being called all the time. So we have to generate constant goodness, and that while our entire movement continues in the good, all the evil that is piled up, because that's what we've been doing, right? So all the evil that were piled up will be attenuated, gradually disappearing upon the impact of helpful vibrations generated in our favor. And where are those vibrations coming from? They're coming from our own minds, and they're also coming from the ones who are doing good things, and from the spirits that surround us, and from everyone else. So it's a network. So it's a chain of goodness that you're kicking, right? That you're starting. Okay. So without express necessity of resorting to the help of disease, Isn't that amazing? So what it's saying is that no, you don't have to go through, but many of us have to. Because listen, we've tried so hard, but we still couldn't make it, right? And sometimes that's really the resort we have, and we have to go some catastrophic illnesses sometimes, right? That's the pile up of evil that he's talking about here, still within us, although we've changed, right? But they're still in there, okay? So this help of the disease is to eliminate the remnants of the darkness that may eventually be incorporated in our mental background. So that's not what we are thinking right now, but they're there deep in our subconscious. They're living there in our spirit, that collection that's still there, right? We have to deal with it. Remember, the laws tell us that, right? The laws are perfect. And if I do something, there will be a consequence for it. I can't escape it. It's inside who I am. It's not someone telling me that, Marco, you got to do this because, listen, because that's the stage of the society we are now, that the laws are implemented from above down. So someone has to tell me that I can't do certain things, so I don't do it. But in reincarnatory planning, that law is in my conscience, and my actions are in the past are just little poking spikes that keep poking my conscience all the time, and they manifest themselves through the energy in our bodies. And that's how the disease process starts. Amazing. Just think about this. It is really. And then Andrea Luiz gave us the recipe, constant goodness. Right. Constant good. That's the cure. Right? That is the cure. Constant goodness. Okay. And obviously, because we have to talk about this, right? Charity and love. So what is that? That's the constant goodness we're talking about, right? So Andrea Luiz says support for others, right? Support for others creates protection for ourselves. Do you guys remember what Jesus was telling us all the time? Love one another. That is exactly what we're talking about here all the time. So if we do that, if we implement the constant goodness or the love for others and the charity and the action of love, that will create the energy that sometimes we need to transform ourselves, comes from outside too, and comes from our minds too, doing the good things, right? It feels good, right? So which is why the principle of Jesus, uprooting us from animality and pride, so removing us from those, vanity and greed, cruelty, avarice, and all those things, and exhorting us to, again, want to take notes of the recipe, right? So simplicity, humility, fraternity without limits, and to unconditional forgiveness. Do you want to know, get a good reason why we still have those dark energies and things accumulating inside us? We don't forgive. If we don't forgive, that will live for a long time inside us. Believe me, it will. And eventually, at some moment, at some time, that will manifest itself, either through trials or through expiations or through the disease process, which is part of the cure. So the perfect immunology, so the immune system is the system that protects us against external factors, right? So the perfect immunology of our inner life, so our own system that protects us from the negativity that we generate, right? That system strengthens the power of the mind in self-defense. So the mind or the mind immune system, what is that? The mind self-defense is when we know ourselves and implement the changes that are needed because the recipe we got, right? Now let's do it. Because if we keep reading about simplicity, humility, and forgiveness, again, we can keep reading about this for ages and centuries. And we're doing it. How many times do you think us have talked about this? This is not the first time, probably the first time using Facebook, but in the centuries that we've incarnated many times before, we've probably done this through many other ways, and we've been taught about it so many times. And I have a feeling that we haven't learned it completely, and that's why I'm doing here. That's why I'm here, right? I know that. But it is time to implement that mechanism of the action of doing this, right? That will defend us against the destructive, degrading elements that surround us, right? And that's the message. And that's why I have that the individual fighting against that little germ, the little bacteria or virus, which is really, we need to be proactive, right? And our best defense is doing good. So it's a what we call a win-win situation, right? You want to protect yourself, do good. Nothing will affect goodness, because goodness is the representation of love, and nothing goes against love. You can't. That's what makes us. That is, you can think about philosophy here. Well, some of the philosophers before had trouble, because they couldn't, fight against some certain ideas, for example, of existence or thinking, for example. Now, love is one of those that you can't really go against. It's the core of who we are, right? So we're getting to the end of tonight's discussion, which I would like to thank you all very much for this. It's a great time, as usual. This is a topic that I really find very, very interesting, but also very helpful to understand, what we need to do. And as usual in André Luiz, there's always the little recipes in there that those are the takeaway home messages for us, right? Just take those and do it, right? And he's very clear about it, right? So let's try to do the same thing for us in our lives. And I have some quick announcements here from Vanessa. That's right, love covers a multitude of mistakes. Absolutely, and that is really the core. Gabriel, that's exactly the core of everything, right? We're giving here more like detailed explanations of mechanism and things, but in the end, yes, we know what to do, right? Jesus told us so many times before. We just have to put things in practice, okay? And that's obviously the most challenging thing to do, okay? But it's time to do it. So I have a few announcements here. So tomorrow, Vanessa, my dear friend Vanessa, we'll be back to go over chapter number 6 again, because there were some technical difficulties with chapter number 6. And she'll go over the chapter again. And next year, there's a lot of interesting things coming up on Correct Radio Live. So I'll probably be coming back again to talk about other books, and I'll let Vanessa give you the big news as soon as we have all the details ready for that. Yeah, love covers a multitude of diseases. Absolutely. Let's get pretty much all of them. Yeah, but what's the good thing about this, Gabriel, is that we'll get there, right? Because we know it's just a matter of time and probably a few more incarnations till we fully understand the meaning of love. And, we're getting there. slowly but steady, right? Which is the important thing. And the efforts that we take towards that is that tells who we are, right? It's not exactly how perfect we are, because we're not even close to that, but how much effort you put into doing that, right? So that is the message. Okay, so next year we'll probably be back again with some other interesting books, and my friend Vanessa will bring you some more of the details. And thank you all for being with us tonight. May God bless all of us, and we have a great night and the rest of the week. And we'll continue on with this little message of love inside our hearts always. Thank you all. So be it.